I thought the jar was romantic. Turns out it was a warning. If you've ever believed money couldn't poison a marriage, let me tell you about the glass jar that sat on my dresser for 8 months and quietly dismantled everything. I thought I knew about my husband, myself, and what love is supposed to look like. It's funny how something so small can feel so loud in hindsight. A clear glass jar, wide mouth, heavy bottom. The kind you'd put flour in or coins or love notes. It clinked every time he dropped something inside it. And for a long time, I smiled every time I heard that sound. Now, even thinking about it makes my chest tighten. I didn't know then that the jar wasn't a gift. It was a ledger. I'm going to back up because context matters. And also because part of why I stayed quiet for so long is that nothing about this started off obviously wrong. My husband, Aaron, and I had been married for a little over 3 years when the jar entered our lives. Together for 7 total. We met in our mid-20s. The way a lot of couples do now, mutual friends. Too much tequila, instant chemistry, followed by a slow burn that felt safe and familiar. He was charming in that low-effort way. I was the planner. He liked to say I was type A with a soft heart, which I thought was a compliment until I realized it was also his way of opting out of responsibility. Aaron made more money than I did. Not wildly more, but enough that it mattered. He worked in finance-adjacent something or other that I never fully understood. Mostly because every time I asked, he'd launch into jargon and then laugh and say, "Don't worry about it, babe. I've got us." I worked in marketing. Steady paycheck, flexible hours, emotional labor galore. From the outside, we looked solid. Cute apartment. No kids yet? Weekend brunches. Inside jokes. He was the fun husband. I was the organized wife. If something needed to be done, appointments, birthdays, bills, vacations, I did it. If something needed to be joked about, Aaron did that. Looking back, the power balance was subtle but real. He earned more, so he felt entitled to decide more. Not in a loud way. In a relax, I know what I'm doing way. In a why are you stressing about that way. In a you're overthinking it way. And I let it slide. Because peace felt easier than being right. There were cracks before the jar. I see them now. The way he'd tease me for tracking expenses. The way he'd joke about how frequently we did or didn't have sex, always framed like a punchline. The way he kept score of things he did for me but called it just teasing. I ignored it. Because nothing felt big enough to blow up a marriage over. Because I loved him. Because I didn't want to be the dramatic wife. Then, about 4 months before my birthday, Aaron came home grinning like he'd cracked the Da Vinci Code. "I have the cutest idea," he said, kicking off his shoes. Like husband of the year level. That should have been my first red flag. He went into the kitchen and came back holding the jar clean, empty, innocent looking. "So," he said, setting it on the dresser, "every time I put money in the jar. And whatever's in there by your birthday is your present." I laughed. I actually laughed. It sounded playful, flirty, like something you'd see in a rom-com montage. "How much money?" I asked. "That depends," he said, wiggling his eyebrows. "On me." I shoved him, we kissed. It felt light, fun. He dropped a 20 in the jar that night. Very theatrically, and bowed like he'd just performed a magic trick. I told my friends. I joked about it online. "My husband invented a sex jar," I said, like it was quirky and not at all weird. People thought it was cute. Some said it was genius. A few said it was strange, but I brushed those comments off. Not everything has to be that deep, right? So the jar became a fixture. I dusted around it. Sometimes I shook it and smiled at the sound. I imagined opening it on my birthday and laughing about how worth it was. At first, then I started noticing the rules. They weren't written anywhere. They were just enforced. Sometimes after he wouldn't put anything in. I'd joke, "Hey, jar forgot." And he'd say, "That one doesn't count," like it was obvious. "Why not?" I'd ask. He'd shrug. Too quick. Or too late. Or we were tired. Or it wasn't like the vibe. The vibe. I hated that word by the 3rd time he used it. He decided the amounts too. Sometimes it was a 20. Sometimes a 5. Once, I swear, it was a single dollar bill folded carefully like it meant something. I told myself not to care. It was a gift, after all. I didn't want to seem greedy or transactional, but I started doing math in my head. Not obsessively, just noticing that the jar wasn't filling as fast as I thought it would. Noticing that he'd forget more often. Noticing that he'd make comments like, "You've been tired lately," or "You've been stressed," like those were explanations. Once, half joking, I said, "Are you deducting for attitude now?" He laughed, but it wasn't warm. I mean, I'm not running a charity. That laugh echoed in my head for weeks. The jar stopped feeling cute. It started feeling like a scoreboard. Like proof of something I couldn't quite name. Some nights, I'd catch myself thinking about whether something would count before it even happened, and then I'd feel gross for thinking that way. I hated that I was internalizing his system. I asked my best friend Lila about it over drinks. "That's odd," she said carefully. "Like, not horrible, but are you okay with it?" "I think so," I said. "I mean, it's supposed to be fun." "Is it fun?" she asked. I opened my mouth and then closed it. "He's probably just being dumb," I said finally. "You know, Aaron." She didn't argue. That should have scared me more than if she had. As my birthday got closer, the jar sat there, half full, mocking me. I started feeling embarrassed by how much I cared. Embarrassed that part of me wanted it to be full, like that would mean something about me. About us. And then came the night that broke everything. Aaron had gone to bed early. I stayed up folding laundry, stewing in that low-grade anxiety I'd been living with for weeks. I don't know what made me do it. Curiosity, intuition, a need to feel grounded. I picked up the jar. It was heavier than I expected. I dumped it onto the bed, meaning to count it, just to have a number in my head. Bills spilled everywhere. 5s, 10s, 20s. Couple of hundreds I hadn't noticed before. And then I saw the slips of paper. Small, folded, tucked between the bills like they belonged there. My stomach dropped. I opened one. Quick fight, another. Pity $1. Another. Argument earlier for $10. I don't remember sitting down, but I must have. Because suddenly I was on the floor, surrounded by money and notes. My hands shaking so badly I could barely unfold the rest. They were all like that. A record. A rating system, comments, deductions, add-ons. One slip in handwriting I knew intimately read, "She initiated to 20s, rare." Another, "Didn't finish, doesn't count." And the worst one, the one that made me actually gag. Birthday fund isn't for her anyway. I stared at that sentence until the words stopped looking like words. The jar wasn't my gift. It was a joke. A bet, a game. I found the proof 5 minutes later when I opened his laptop. My hands numb, my brain buzzing. There was a spreadsheet. Tabs, dates, amounts, notes. A running total labeled jar. And another column, real fund. My name wasn't on it. The real fund was labeled with a name I didn't recognize. When I confronted him, I was calmer than I've ever been in my life. That scares me in retrospect. I laid everything out on the bed. The jar, the money, the notes. The laptop open to the spreadsheet. "What is this?" I asked. He looked confused, then annoyed, then defensive. "You went through my stuff?" he said, like that was the crime. "What is this?" I repeated. He sighed, rubbed his face, and said, "You weren't supposed to see that." That sentence cracked something open in me. "So it's real," I said. "You've been tracking me, rating me, deducting money based on your mood." "You're being dramatic," he said immediately. "It was just a joke." "For who?" I asked. "Because it wasn't funny to me." He tried to explain. He always did. He said it was motivational. He said it was private. He said the real fund was for something else, something he wasn't ready to talk about. "You let me believe that jar was for me," I said. "You let me think my birthday present depended on how good I was for you." "That's not what I meant," he said. "But that's what you did." He looked genuinely shocked that I was hurt. Like he'd never considered that my feelings existed independently of his intentions. The aftermath was quiet. No screaming. Just a long, slow unraveling. I moved out 2 weeks later. The jar came with me. I dumped the money into my own account. Not because I needed it, but because I refused to let it symbolize shame anymore. The jar sits empty now on a shelf where I can see it. A reminder. Love isn't supposed to be conditional. And if someone keeps score, it's because they're already planning to win. The last thing Aaron ever said to me about it was, "I didn't think you'd take it this seriously." That's the thing, I finally did.